Okay, hi, gorgeous sisters.
Hi.
Welcome to the Mom Goddess.
Thank you
Hi.
for having
So
me.
today, you're welcome. Today we have joining with us the amazing Mom Goddess, Michele. Yay! Thank you, thank you.
Yes, my
So
pleasure.
she is sharing some. Thank you. Yes, she is sharing some very important information about mold and how it affects our homes and our lives. So, hello, welcome, Michele. So happy
Hi.
to have you.
Thank you for having me. And I am very passionate about this topic, so I'm glad to be able to share.
Oh, thank you. Well, then let's just jump right in, right?
Okay,
So,
yeah.
I mean, I know mold is something we kind of like don't think about, right? So it's not
Mm-mm.
like something we typically go investigate out of
No.
interest. It's
Mm-mm.
usually by some experience that we're introduced to it and we have to action
Mm-hmm.
on it, right? So through events that have happened, you've become an expert and an advocate for mold safety. So, because I know this has been your experience, so if you could share with us your story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to. So, it's hard to know where to begin because it's kind of mold is kind of a meandering journey. It's not something that, well, some people might, immediately figure out what is the root cause of their issues. But for a lot of people, it's a trial and error thing where you start to experience health problems and you're not exactly sure why, and doctors kind of don't know what's going on. So it's sort of mysterious. And for us, it was actually specifically with our son, who um, was diagnosed with a severe autoimmune condition. And it sort of started out as a celiac, gastrointestinal distress, difficulty digesting, things like that. And unfortunately, even though we were following the gluten-free diet and sort of following protocol, he wasn't getting better and continued to get worse and worse. And, and just kind of trial by error, a mom who didn't give up, a mom who wouldn't take no for an answer. I just kept searching and searching, believing that there had to be a reason, rather than just, oh, this is just a mysterious illness and you're going to have to live with it. He started to present with mental health problems. And the prognosis was basically psych meds and institutionalism at the age of 10, and I didn't want to accept that as the answer. And so I continued to search for answers, and I was led down the path of mold. Someone mentioned it to me. My cousin actually asked me if I had ever considered mold to be a culprit in this journey of his health challenges. And I hadn't ever even thought of it. It hadn't crossed my mind. I had never heard of such a thing. I mean, we've all heard of mold and, specifically black mold and how bad it can be, but I don't think anybody really knows, like, what that means. What does it mean that it's bad? Like, in what way? What does it do? And for us, interestingly, it wasn't actually black mold. That's the one that's the most sort of PR. But really, there's, I think, over 100 strains of mold, and any number of them can be debilitating or even lethal, depending on the person. And I think the difficulty with mold is that every person fits. So we're a family of 4 living in the same house. All of us were kind of struggling with a little bit of health challenges. My older son developed some asthma. This was a new house that we had purchased. It was a new old home. It was a very old home, but new to us. And my older son started to have respiratory problems, asthma, and things like that. My husband and I were having joint pain and different brain fog, different things like that. And our youngest son was, for years, had been struggling with unrelenting strep throat, some respiratory issues, and things like that. So actually, his health problems, before we got to the digestive issues, became They had been there really for a while, but we weren't connecting the dots. All of them seemed kind of not connected. They were just one-off illnesses, a strep throat infection here and respiratory illness there, and then digestive issues. So we weren't really linking anything together until we were encouraged to look for mold. And once we did, we hired a mold expert to come in and found a very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like an invisible mold. It's called Aspergillus mold. It's white, it's powdery. You wouldn't really notice it, honestly. It kind of seemed like dust in the basement, but it was everywhere. And we also inadvertently found another strain of mold, penicillium mold, which was also in our basement that we hadn't thought to look. It was hiding behind a table that we were storing down in the basement. And so the mold guy said, I'm not even going to test your air because this is all through your house. This is, it's feeding through your air ducts into your bedroom, pretty much to every room in your. And meanwhile, our son continued to get sicker and sicker. The youngest one did. And again, going back to that thing, not every person presents the same. And so why was he getting so sick, but the rest of us weren't? We did have, health issues, but he was just progressively getting worse and worse and worse, to the point where we felt that he was, it's been fatal. I thought it. He was having bloody noses, and just layered one on top of another on top of another. And it was sort of like a snowball where once his health started to decline, it started to decline rapidly against the clock, trying to figure out what was happening. And so after the mold guy came in and, identified it, we went back to the hospital trying to get more answers from his blood to see if there were mycotoxins, which is the toxins that mold gives off inside of your body. And they basically told us there was nothing they could do, that they couldn't test for something like that. And so the following month was able to figure out that he had a combination between a mold toxicity and a chronic underlying strep infection that we didn't even know about. And that diagnosis for children is called PANDAS, pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with streptococcus. And so essentially the mold had been breaking down his immune system and left him vulnerable to a strep infection that his body couldn't fight. And it crossed his blood-brain barrier. So thankfully, we were able to heal him after a number of months of intensive, clean eating and essential oils, cleaning our air, cleaning our home, getting rid of stuff out of our basement that was exposed to the mold, and cleaning up the stuff that was, that we couldn't get rid of, like our couches and, mattresses and different things like that, painting walls, dusting everything that we could to clean up our dust that may have had mold spores in it, and just a nonstop belief that we would heal him, and that belief that we could heal him is what continued to push us forward to keep searching for answers and finding holistic ways of healing him, and thankfully we were able to do that.
That is an incredible story, Michele. Like, what a journey you've been on. And I know personally, like, hearing some of the things you've gone through, I mean, it's been quite an intense road. I mean, like, as a mom, when seeing your child suffering and not knowing,
it was
what
hideous.
the issue is
Yeah.
and how to help him.
Mm-hmm.
That is an amazing thing. Well, I mean, you're like the warrior goddess mom to, like.
Well, thank you.
And
I
figure it out.
Thank you. I had a super supportive husband too, and that helped a lot as well, like to bolster my intuition as a mother, to have that support from my husband. Oops, I got dead air there. Okay.
Yeah, and that does make a difference, right, to have that support. So when you made that connection that, oh my God, it's the mold, were you just kind of ready to just
run out of the house? I mean, like, were you just like immediately frantically pouring bleach everywhere? I mean, like, what were
Well, essentially that's what happened. I mean, for the most part. So when we found out that there was mold, it was like a sense of relief in one hand because we had answers, and a sense of panic on the other. And so, because now what? Now what do we do? How do we clean this up? Can we live here? Do we have to move out? And so, so what ended up happening was we decided that we would try to stay because we felt that, he had been living there for all that time, and, we would just try to heal him. And unfortunately, when we made that decision that very night, he ended up in the emergency room again with just very critical symptoms. And so we moved out. We just packed some bags and asked some relatives if we could stay with them, and moved out while we waited for our house to be remediated from mold. And that's quite a process and very expensive as well. And so it's for anyone who has a mold issue in their home, because it's something that you can't describe to someone. You can't describe the amount of work that goes into cleaning up from it, to trying to heal in the home where you originally were sick. It's just difficult. And there's, not just physically difficult, but emotionally difficult. It's traumatic to go through such a thing. I kind of likened it to like people whose houses burn down, right? And everything's destroyed, but except with a fire, insurance will pick that up. I mean, maybe sometimes they won't cover everything you want them to, but with mold, sometimes it's not covered and it's out of pocket, and it's extremely expensive to replace things and do the remediation. So it's very difficult, but we committed to it, and we're glad that we did. And we installed air filters into our home on every floor of our house, and invested in air filters, and and just invested in doing what we could. After a while, it's you kind of drive yourself crazy thinking, like, looking everywhere in your house at all the places that mold could be sort of lurking. It can live in your books. It loves paper. It loves glue. We had a lot of paper files in our house because we worked from home. So we tried to scan as much as we could and get rid of as much paper as we could, but we still had books and different things, carpets and couches. So anyway, so we moved out, tried to kind of, regroup mentally, while still trying to focus on healing our son and figuring out the next steps to clean up our house. I think the best thing I can say is, if you do think that you have mold in your home, to reach out to someone who's been through it and have a support system, because it's mentally, emotionally, financially, physically taxing on everyone in the family.
Exactly. And that's actually a really good question that I know everyone's going to be asking, since I know this is a passion of yours to be educating. Where could they find out more about mold to better educate themselves? Do you have any suggestions or links or places that they could go?
I think that's actually a difficult thing. That's what makes, again, mold so difficult, because there's not like a clearinghouse of information where you can go. I went to mold support groups that I found was helpful. But there's a blog that I was following by a doctor. She's a functional medicine doctor out of Colorado, who herself has been mold injured and has recovered from mold. Her office actually was water damaged, and she ended up with terrible, terrible mold problems and really bad physical issues. And so she supports a lot of people who are mold injured. And her name's Dr. Jill Carnahan. And you can Google her, search her online. And but she's got great blogs and articles that you can read. You can search mold on her blog, on her website, under her blog section, and she's got all kinds of resources and hyperlinks to different information. High dose vitamin C is a big one, trying to bring down inflammation in the body. She's a proponent of that. So all those ones that we kind of always hear about when it comes to the immune system: high dose vitamin C, high dose vitamin D, things like that. She's big into far infrared saunas. So we did invest in an infrared sauna for our son and ourselves, because we were also struggling with health issues. I'm trying to think. And clean eating, like maybe a keto or paleo diet helps kind of starve out mold out of your gut. And honestly, that's 90% of the healing, I would say, is, eating that cleaner diet and cleaning your air, kind of the basics. I felt overwhelmed by how much information was out there, just kind of searching around, trying to find answers. And like I said, no real clearinghouse for like real specific information. So there's all these different things, rabbit holes that you can go down. And so I kind of just went back to the basics of thinking through, okay, it's nutrition, it's our air that we're breathing, the water we're drinking, getting rest, because the body does get sick when the body goes through something like that. And then supplements if you don't have access, like in our colder climates, we might not have access to vitamin D in parts of, certain times of the year. So supplementing with a really good D3K2 mix, that's really important. So those things really help, the body to recover from something so cold.
Those are great suggestions. And I know you just went down a major path of like finding all of these resources, like all of these ways of like healing your son, of like what was going to work. And I think essential oils too was an option. I think you were into that too.
Yeah. Essential oils, because it did cross my son's blood-brain barrier, essential oils also barrier, and they're I found to be extremely supportive in his healing. We used frankincense, and you want to get, a pure grade essential oils that don't have any kind of contaminants in them. But we found frankincense to be an extremely healing oil. I would put it at the base of his brain, sort of down here at the nape of his neck. And right here also, I would sort of, consecrate his forehead with essential oils, with frankincense. I did pray over him, and I do think that there's a lot of power in prayer as well, and putting that energy on yourself or your children. I do think that was a big part of his healing as well.
Yes, that's beautiful. Well, I know in terms of looking for mold, because there are parents who have children who have these symptoms and they don't even know that it could be mold. And so they start over medicating them, trying to cover symptoms, whereas it could be misdiagnosed, and the problem stays in the home. So just making sure you're checking your home, checking the corners, checking for leaks. I know one home that we lived in, we had rented for a summer. I had the kids' like clothes and toys all stacked in like this guest room closet. And one day when I was moving it around, in the bottom of the corner of the closet, I noticed little black specks on the wall. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's black mold in that room. Another friend of ours, their children got very sick, and they started getting, like very similar symptoms you were saying. And they didn't know what the issue was. And they found out that their house was full of mold because a hose had come off of their washing machine and was dripping into insulation. Insulation got, and it was all in their floor. They had floor air ventilation. So it was just blowing throughout their house, all of this mold. So they had to go through that whole process. So it's just kind of really investigating your home.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think also it's a lot of like keeping an open mind, because so many people that I've talked to when I mention mold are like, oh no, that's not possible, which I know denial is probably part of it, but people assume that because they live in a new possibly have mold, but not the case. Some houses now, especially the way they're constructed on site in the elements, getting wet, the studs get wet. They put drywall over it while the studs are wet. the insulation gets put in there, and the next thing you know, you've got blankets of black mold that is growing the walls. And just because it's not exposed doesn't mean it couldn't hurt you. Same in the subfloor. So a lot of people have mold in their subfloor bath, So I think it's keeping an open mind. And, if you really want to get to the root of the problem and you really do want to, feel better or make sure that your child feels better, you really do have to investigate every possible option, and mold might be one of them. Mold is attributed to a myriad of symptoms that is a mile long. And like I said, you can have a family of 4 or 6 house, and not two people don't have the same symptoms. And that's why it's difficult to diagnose and difficult to pinpoint that could possibly be the root cause, because it's like, well, we're not all sick. Well, that's because everybody's body handles it differently, and you just don't know how you're going to respond. I think it's just keeping an open mind and investigating your house. You can get mold kits that are pretty cheap from like a hardware store. They're like, let them out on your countertop and leave them out. I didn't use that kind, but I believe you leave them out for like 24 hours and see if mold grows in the dish. I believe it's 24, maybe it's 48 hours, but yeah, that's kind of a cheap way to kind of see if there's mold spores that are kind of floating around in the air. I mean, that can be a challenge too, because your window's open. I mean, mold is everywhere. That is true. And, there is mold that lives outside in like decaying leaves or, whatever the case may be. So there is a natural, amount of mold that I guess we're all exposed to. But when we're shut inside a lot of the time, and, those mold counts are high inside the house and it's circulating through your ventilation system, that's where you start to really have some very serious issues. And you can carry it from house to house too. That's the other thing. So your current house may not be, necessarily full of, but maybe you came from a place that had mold and you didn't know it, and you're carrying it with you in your mattresses, your pillows, your books. And so again, that's where it starts to become to them. That's, this mold that we had, it kind of looks like almost like a water stain on things. And one of the things that we found was the big culprit of our mold was an old dresser that I had from my childhood. I mean, maybe I carried it with me. It's hard to know, but our house did have a slow leak like what you mentioned. Our ice maker was dripping into our basement. In those cases, homeowners insurance usually does kind of cover the remediation because it was inside the home that caused it. But, for us, it was the ice maker that was the culprit. So it's just hard to know. It's just such a difficult thing. I just would say to, keep an open mind and be open to what people have to say, and sort of experiment with whether or not it could be potentially mold that could be the root cause.
Well, that is amazing information. And I know that your son is doing so much better now, and you've gotten rid of the mold. And you're an amazing mom goddess.
Thank you.
What is a life lesson that you've learned that you would like to share to all of our mom goddesses?
Oh my goodness. I think that's my life lesson, is to keep that open mind and to never say no, or to never accept no as an answer. I had experts, doctors, friends and family saying, no, that can't be it, or no, you're crazy. Like I was kind of the crazy mom in the room, but I just wouldn't accept it. I wouldn't accept it. Because I think we have to be in touch with who our children are and who we are as mothers, as mom goddesses, that we have that innate ability that was given to us to know. And I think if your gut, your intuition is saying, no, this is something else. There's got to be a reason why my child is struggling. And, it might be things like that's become sort of socially acceptable, if you will, like ADD, things like that. Like, oh, well, they've got ADD. That's just the way it is. We got to put them on meds. No, that might not be it. There might be a root cause that you can get rid of it, get to the bottom of it and help your child be medication free.
Exactly.
So, it got to the point where I was, getting in doctors' faces saying no. And so just because you don't have a degree at the end of your name maybe doesn't mean that you don't. And so I would just say never take no for an answer. Always be looking, always be searching and following your intuition, because we were born with it and there's a reason we have it.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michele, and thank you for your
You're
contribution to us.
You're welcome.
And thank you for being an advocate to everyone. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. So you're an amazing mom goddess.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So,
well, thank you.
And thank you to all of the sisters
Tammy,
for joining us.
Wants to reach out. Oh,
yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh, we have a delay. I was just going to say, if anyone wants to reach out, if they want to, contact you and want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to talk to anyone who feels that they need support or encouragement. I don't really have a one-stop shop kind of place where they can go and get all the answers, but I'd be happy to point them to a couple places that help me. And like I said, I do highly encourage people to look into Dr. Jill Carnahan's website.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'll be sharing some links below for some of these resources. So thank you so much. And
my pleasure.
I love to you all. And remember, flow and glow.
I love it.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.